much. Now I know why people call you TK, because they are scared to mispronounce your names. Well, as the topic suggests, you and I are in for a treat today because the first part of this conversation might just shock you a bit. And the idea is not to shock you, but for us to faithfully so speak on matters that involve us or that affect us on a daily basis. And that is a matter of leadership. If anyone thinks leadership, it's for those in leadership positions. One, you have lost the plot. Second, you have missed an opportunity to lead your very life. Leadership starts with you. But today we're looking at a figure, and I want to use the word figure, a very important figure for me. As a young man growing up, Joseph has been that figure. But the older I got, the more complex he became in my eyes. And it's so funny because his story, it's written, it's static. It has not changed. But clearly, I have been changing. I have been developing. And as the more I developed, the more I started seeing him differently. Now, I want to put up front to you a conversation, and I wish you and I were not giving this one-way direction conversation. It was not a monologue. I wish it was a dialogue where we would sit around as a group. In fact, it would be nice to have a debate, if you would, where one group would say this about Joseph or the other. That way, there's a richness in between of what we would say. So the idea is, I wish we could be asking each other a question. Was Joseph a capitalist or a father of capitalism? And then I would love to hear conversations on both sides where somebody will argue yes and others says no. So I want you to prep yourself. We're going to talk about capitalism in a minute. But if you are following, the goal is not even to glorify or critique capitalism per se. What I hope you get out of this discussion today is the legacy of Joseph in the light of strategic management and what does that mean for leadership today, and especially for you as a Christian leader, and some of you are business leaders. And so it's important that we capacitate. I dislike this position that we have as Christians, that we often would tell the world and tell each other what we don't like. Now, there's nothing wrong with you telling me what you don't like. But what I find problematic is that we have become proficient in describing what we do not stand for, what we do not like, and yet we forget to tell what we stand for. As a result, we become experts of what you are anti, but we don't know what you stand for. Just because you are anti something else doesn't mean you are for something else that we know. We don't know what you're for. And so it has been my philosophy to say, rather let me tell you what I'm for. And then we can talk about what I'm not for, but I want you to know the best. And I could elaborate that as a pastor, as you know, even for relationships within marriage relationships. It's important for the other partner to know, what is my husband like? What does my husband like? If your partner only knows what you don't like, they'll become expert of what you don't like. But in the good day, they'll not know what is it that you like. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about, when it's your birthday, how difficult it is for people to find a gift for you. If it's difficult, that means they know everything else you don't like. They don't know what you like. Now, from that vantage point, allow me to get into the details of today. So, and I want to thank you, really. I want to thank you for joining me today and my family. And above all, thank you for choosing Dr. Taiwo. Well, I'm calling him doctor is because I'm putting pressure on him. I need him to change his title. And so thank you for that. And thank you for that introduction. So he'll soon be doctor. But for now, let's call him Pastor Taiwo. And thank you for inviting us, sir. We feel honored to be in your presence. Thank you. I want to start by acknowledging that Joseph's story is an ancient story. But allow me to say its roots and its help and its advices are written in weight in gold. Joseph's story will continue. I believe my son and daughters in the future will have this conversation in a different world altogether. But for us today, Let's delve in. Let's talk about Joseph for a moment. But before we do so, it's important for you and me to ask ourselves the following. And this morning, as I was thinking about coming here, I first thought, why will Joseph's story become important for our discussion today? And I want to give to you that upfront by saying, when we prepare students for business studies, whether it's an MBA or a similar course, there are what we call core subjects that are part of that preparation, such as human resource, HR, accounting, and there's both financial and management accounting, and we'll add marketing to that. We'll add economics to that, and then we'll add strategic management to that. Of late, we've added digitalization, basically to deal with today's, up moving of technology. But the five were the core. Everyone who has done business studies in any shape or form would have at least either specialized in one of those or have the component of them. But these are deemed as essential to make sure that a leader, or especially business leader, is rounded off in understanding the world of business and be able to deal with all the aspects that deal with business. Now, you will agree and at least embrace the fact that amongst these five that I've mentioned, now six, economics, it's a different one. It's a different kettle altogether. In fact, it stands out because it extends its scope simply beyond traditional boundaries of business opportunities or business discipline, and it uniquely integrates politics, social, and environmental factors in its theoretical framework. Now, making it a critical component in strategic decision making. Now, here's a point about economics. Unlike its counterparts, it starts by rationalizing things that are not rational. I mean, how do you rationalize politics? How do you rationalize economic environment in which a particular business is at? So in other words, economics will not just look at setting up a business there. No, we'll interrogate what type of people are there. What is their literacy levels? We'll look into what type of weather is there. And all those factors, instead of just drafting out that I'll sell this, and therefore that would be for accounting guys to do that. I'll sell this for 10 rands or for 10 shillings or for $10, but I'll buy it for $2. That's afterwards. Before we even check that, we'll first analyze political environment. Before we set up a business, we'll verify how stable politics are there and what type of politics are there. Now, allow me to tell you something else. See, growing up as a young boy, politics found us playing soccer, found us catching birds. Unlike in other instances where people would go to school or be put in a secluded underground place to be taught politics, for us, politics found us, on our way from fetching the cows that were grazing, and on our way back, we will be given serious understanding of our politics of the day. And the politics I'm referring to that were, at least the version of it in South Africa, it was not the politics that I talk about today, not at all. Our political picture was rooted in pain and disenfranchisement. And as a result, politics or political language was a matter of survival mechanism, if you would. However, it shaped my philosophical outlook, right? And as a result, I could not see the connection between my understanding of politics or even politics as a subject that would somehow later on be integrated in economics or business studies, because those are politics of survival. Those are politics of trying to make out of pain. Now, having said that, I need to bring you to at least the first thought as I'm about to talk about Joseph. Having embraced what economics is about, having embraced what politics and its impact and my view of it, I want to make this statement to you that in order for us to weigh evaluate the value of a particular study, a value of a particular lesson that or lessons you've learned, we normally don't just look into the content of what you are being taught or what you're being taught on how many pages, how many books you read. We look into the tools that are being used to assess you. You see, the tools that are used to assess anything, the thoroughness of those tools tells us the depth and the comprehension or how comprehensive what you learned is and how critical it is. You see, what we use to test how thorough it is, how comprehensive it is, speaks to the input. See, the tools gets the output. Now, when we started looking at some of the tools that are used in economics, we then realize that we're not just looking at crunching numbers. We're not just looking at making profit. We're not just looking at being the best and having the biggest profits out there that other business studies would do. Now, we have a tool. It's just one of the tools that are used in business, or rather in this case in economics, and it's called PESTEL. Now, it's an acronym. PESTEL means P-E-S-E-L, PESTEL, which simply stands for political, economic, social, technological, environment, and legal factors. So in other words, that framework, you can tell that is bigger than just making profit. It's bigger than just producing a item, producing a solution. No, it's bigger than that. It look at the social environment that in which that business is at. Now, this strategic framework enables us to examine the macro environmental factors that influence an organization. Now, having looked at that, I therefore want to encourage you to the following. We mentioned and we alluded to capitalism. And now you know that many of you, in fact, in this room, I wish I could have a show of hands. There are many of you here who are for capitalism. And there are many of you here who says, no, that should not be the case, right? And but allow me, at least let's define it so that we know what are we disagreeing with and what are we agreeing with. Well, capitalism is an economic system that is characterized by private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Central feature of capitalism include capital accumulation, competitive markets, and a price system. I want to tell you more about that some of the key aspects that are found in capitalism include, as I mentioned, private property. So where people have properties theirs, it doesn't belong to government, and they can accumulate capital, and the economy is, market economy, and there's competitive markets within that particular system. And the motive is clear, it's profit. And they have limited government interaction into that. And maybe I want to stop here for a moment and acknowledge something that is staring in front of our faces. In South Africa's news today, Nigeria again and South Africa, they are fighting. I don't know if you are aware, Pastor TK. I don't know what's up with our countries. But for many of you who know, who do not know, again, we have the saga in South Africa where a young lady who was born in this country, but born to two parents, generally you're born to two parents. But in this case, the father is from Nigeria and the mother was assumably from South Africa, but now the revelations is she's from another country. Now, but she's entered South Africa, right? And therefore, the challenge is she South African? And I think as leaders in this platform, as African leaders, this issue of Africa will need to be defined, will need to define. In fact, put it this way. As long as we live with definitions given to us that we never had a right to define them, we'll always fight each other, we'll always be in chains. We do need to start entering the conversation of defining some of the definitions that were given to us. Define for me Africa. Define, in fact, forget Africa. Define to me an African. Who is an African? As long as we take our roots and our definition of who we are from France, from England, and from elsewhere, we can never truly have what you call an African. Today, for those of you in Namibia, in case you're not seeing, the flag on my shirt, on my jacket is from Namibia. What right do I have to wear that flag? Anyway, allow me. I thought I would do that in the beginning, but I got derailed by welcoming others.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Do you intend to share your screen, your presentation?
Is it not sharing?
No, it's not sharing. Sorry. Yeah.
You are seeing it.
No, we couldn't.
Oh my! I've been sharing a screen that no one is seeing.
Yes, please. Sorry.
I see it. I thought I was seeing it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I've been seeing it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we can see it, sir.
Oh, okay. Now it's here now.
Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Pastor Taiwo, Namibia is giving you too much meat. I know they give too much meat in the country.
Okay. My apology for that.
Okay.
You can blame.
All right.
You can blame Reverend Dolly and Reverend Festus because they are spoiling me here.
All right. Let's continue then.
Yes, please.
I've moved from the issue of Africa and issue of Nigeria. See, at least we're not fighting. So I've defined the key aspects of capitalism, and so having defined what that is, many of you would have a understanding of that. In fact, allow me to share this with you. When I was doing my undergrad, the only professor to have given me an A in my early year, whom I loved dearly, that was in homiletics. Now, this gentleman, him and I developed good relationship, and obviously, I mean, whoever gives you an A, it's a good friend of yours as a student. But I grew to fondly love him. And once I completed my studies, there was a year that I posted something about Steve Biko. Many of you would know he is known as a father of Black consciousness in South Africa. And I put that out there as a post. Festus, your mic is unmuted. Now, he came back to me with a rebuttal and asking me, why would you say something about Steve Biko? And I asked, what's wrong? He says to me, that guy was a socialist. He believed in socialism. And now, to be honest with you, for all Africans, maybe that's not where we start from. We have engaged that man from a different point of view. And the issues of capitalism versus socialism have been hidden in a way that we will not draw lines of whether to like a person or not from those vantage. But I realize there's a group in our country that would die. In fact, they have even drawn their theological boundaries between those who are for capitalism and those who are from socialism. Now, if that's not has been the case for you, well, welcome to the club. But the truth is, we have people, and these two points, these two philosophies, they infest and they make life for many people. And I think that makes us ask the next question. What was Joseph's philosophical and economic strategy based on? Was it based on capitalism, or was it something else? Now, you will embrace and accept the fact that capitalism is a new term. In fact, it's a new system. It's made up of. And you will appreciate the fact that for those who put it together, may or may not have learned from Joseph, and those who talk about socialism may or may not have learned from Joseph. But I think it's important for you and I to at least interrogate Joseph not from the lens only of capitalism or from socialism or any other ism, if you would, system that is out there. But let's try to see, for you as a business owner, for you as a Christian leader, for you as a leader, what can you learn from Joseph? And then we'll go back to the issue of capitalism and we'll therefore see if these stories even matter. Now, Joseph's story, particularly during his time in Egypt, it showcased some fundamental or foundational elements of economic management. Because from Pharaoh's dream, Joseph coming with a solution to that dream, and then being put in charge of implementing what he proposed as a solution, it provides a golden thread that I want to pause for a moment and to say this to you. Quite often in our system, in our society also, we have people who are good at telling us what is the thing to do, what's the right thing to do, and yet the same are not the people to implement it. But you'll notice something about Joseph. He proposed a solution that he was willing to put his head on the block for and to implement it. I don't know if maybe that's a first lesson to learn. Is there something for us to learn there? That many times we have solutions proposed by somebody else, and then somebody else will be hired to implement that solution. And guess what? That person will fail to implement that solution. And then we'll say either the government has failed or the business has failed. Point number one. But allow me to itemize some of the few things that I learned from Joseph's economic strategy. And I'll put them in this fashion. You'll notice that one of the things that was key in his dream interpretation and in his implementation was Joseph was willing and able to forecast and plan. So forecasting and planning are critical. And allow me to speak to pastors amongst us. See, because of our philosophical understanding of provision in the church, sometimes we don't do this. We don't even think that God would want us to do this. Yeah, we don't focus. We don't plan ahead because we say God will provide. And I want to speak to that. God's provision is not a reason, or God's unknown methods of provision and timing of provision. It's no reason for you to fail to forecast or plan. Because the question that you should ask yourself is, in the forecasting and in the planning, do you not invite God? Somehow, if forecasting and planning is without God, for sure, then you somehow exist outside God. But I want to encourage pastors to consider, if the Holy Spirit guides you, I'm sure the Spirit can guide you in forecasting and planning. The second thing that you see in Joseph's time and in his skills and in his strategy was resource management. Look, in the years of abundance, the man managed to make sure that what he had was sufficient for today, and what he had in his hand would be sufficient even for, say, 14 years to come, because part of the profits of the first year were used to be banked. Part of it was banked, if you use today's language, and would gain interest, if you would, somehow in value, because by the time in the years of struggle, that was worth 10 times more, if you would, than what it worth in the first year of his investment of it. There's something for us to learn there, leaders, something about resource management. You see, we learn to live by faith, and that's our philosophical framework. There's nothing wrong with living by faith if your faith is informed by such strategies. So imagine if you live by faith and you learn to resource manage. That means your resources, not only will they abound, and I think the scriptures is littered with examples of planning. I mean, you'll hear Jesus say something like, he who builds a house first plans. Now, some people will find that too worldly to do. But I want to show you something else, that our friend Joseph did exactly that. Something that we'll call a worldly system. But he did it so well, and I'm sure the world stole it from him. But we can talk about that later. The other thing is, the man had an economic policy and he implemented it, as I mentioned. And in the process, there's what you call capital accumulation. Now, many of us, when we think of capital accumulation, we think of somebody must borrow us money, borrow us some capital so we can start a business. Well, some people have survived that way. Some people have made it that way. But majority live as slaves of whoever borrowed them capital.
Mhm.
You'll realize that God always gives us something in hand. And if we are wise enough, able to apply even some of the strategies, that's all we ever need. You don't need anything else. You don't need anyone else from another country to come and invest in your country. Your country actually has enough. You just need some Joseph's wisdom in planning these things. I'm about to move this to another controversial person. We have a book that was written some years ago called Capitalist Nigger. And I know to some of you, your ears will be itchy because there's a last word there that is banned in some countries, but it's a book that is out there. And it happened to be written by a gentleman who originates from Nigeria, even though he lives in the US, Capitalist Nigger. And again, it's one of those texts I wish you and I would be sitting as leaders and critiquing it. I've been part of debates on whether is it something that we should consider or not. Now, I want to do some alignment with some of the practices that we learned there. But before I do so, allow me to make this statement that Joseph's context was vastly different from our modern capitalism, which is typically characterized by private property rights, capital accumulation by private individuals than a state or the monarch, and a competitive markets. Now, Joseph, on the contrary, he operated under a monarch and what we could call it a theocratic system where the state, being Pharaoh, owned the resources and the wealth accumulation mechanism. Yet we see Joseph applying some of the principles that when we look, we can identify them, that these are used well by capitalism. But in Joseph's context, those were used and they benefited everyone who lived in Egypt according to their ranks. So it is therefore important to mention that while Joseph's economic action might resemble those in capitalism system, they were fundamentally driven by the needs of a theocratic state rather than a market-driven capitalism. However, it's important to bring another modern scholar, if you would, to this particular conversation. And I mentioned that Onyeani presents what we call a provocative view on economic empowerment and a self-reliance within African diaspora, focusing on how individuals can achieve economic power by adopting what he refers to as a spider web doctrine. Now, from the title of the book, you can hear where he's coming from. He is not against capitalistic views. In fact, he says, listen, and Africans should learn how to Africanize, if you would, that system, and he called it capitalist nigger. But you can hear the anger out of that because those against, probably he came from politics that I came from, that came from pain and struggle. And again, if you are a foreigner in the US, you will know very well how this term means. Allow me to try to get to the point I'm getting to. And for those of you who can read and engage with this manuscript, do so. But there's few things I want to mention regarding the integration between these concepts and others, that at least from his point of view, there's something about economic reliance that many Africans lack, many African markets lack. We are so dependent in other markets for us to function, and therefore we don't come as equal partners to that. And I think it's because many a times we are heavily funded. And if you are heavily funded from another context, it becomes difficult for you to even contest or to even make suggestions. Strategic networking is what he refers to. Innovative entrepreneurship is speaking about leveraging opportunities that we have, and a moral and ethical standards, which is something that Joseph would talk about. Now, allow me to get to this point. As a business leader today, as a Christian man or woman, often it's not the type of business you have that is a problem. The problem is your philosophical and economical underpinning. What's underpinning your thinking? I've chosen two things that I just want to discuss with you. On issues of providence and strategic planning, you and I, in majority, we have this belief that providence does not require us to do anything. As in, if God is going to provide, as a result, you just sit there and just wait for God to provide. Now, I want to emphasize, God provides. And you have no part in how he provides and what he provides. What you have part in, you have part in being ready for that providence and managing that providence. And that, my brother and my sister, requires you. It does not negate the need for human action in comprehending that. So in other words, it's not God who must grow. It's you who must grow. It's not God who must prepare. It's you who must prepare. And if by preparing is by learning how, for example, ask yourself this question. Should God trust you now, trust your church, trust your organization, trust your household with $100 million? What would you do with it? Now, if you cannot work that out to the minute detail, well, good, come down there, do $1 million. And if your brain can still not navigate that, well, good, come down. And when you've done that, then it will tell you what you are ready for and what you should be trusted for. It tells you, not God. God can still give you more. But the question is, the principles are the same. He who is faithful with a little will be trusted with more. Look at the next point. Under philosophical underpinnings, we want to talk about economic lesson. And I'm asking, your leadership, even with your own budget, your own household budget, there should be a balance between adaptability and strategic foresight. So in other words, understand that even though this is what I plan to do, and you've done everything A to Z or A to Z, the issue of adaptability, the most beautiful picture is of a palm tree that has been moved, swayed by a tsunami to the floor, right, as the wind and as a storm's flow. But something about that tree is that when the storms are over, it flexes so much that when the storms are over, it will be the first one by the beachside praising the Lord. Allow me to park it here, and I see our time has gone. I was still getting deep. My intention is maybe to provoke you rather than give you a lesson. I'm sure I'll have these notes and even more detailed notes provided to Pastor Taiwo on arguing for or against. But my intention this morning is to ask you, in terms of capitalism, in terms of socialism, in terms of what governs your economic understanding, what best do you learn? Well, what are the best lessons that you learn? In fact, allow me to take it to my last slide to say, I would love to ask you a question instead of you looking out there and ask, what are the keys to success? I want to ask you, can you give me 4 keys that you say, this is key to success, my brother? And don't give it to me, maybe in conversation. Ask yourself, what has been key to your success? What has been key to your leadership in whatever environment you've been leading at? One of the worst things we do as African leaders is we over-rely on tested and tried methods by others without us taking those tested and tried methods by others, applying them in our systems and our context so that they can become our tested and tried methods. I remember as I'm closing and allowing maybe for conversations and maybe questions or even pushbacks. I remember when Pastor Yonggi Cho came to the fore, everybody left, right, and center was now doing home cells because that was a tested and tried method that he tried.
Mm.
And needless to tell you how that worked out for some, how that worked out for others. I remember when Rick Warren came up with his book, everybody wanted to have a Saddleback model. Yes, tested and tried in that context. Has it worked for everyone? Could you have at least learned from that, adapt it to your context, and make it work? I'm therefore wanting to close by saying, we learn, at least in summary, that Joseph exhibited the forecasting and planning skill as a strategic point of view, and resource management, economic policy and implementation, and capital accumulation. I summarize them like that, but there's quite more things that we could say. And in the name of strategic planning, you know, a strategy is one word or is a one sentence, but in it, it needs to be distilled, it needs to be diluted because it's all concentrated.